All right, welcome today to Going the Distance, Learning with Games. I'm Liz Newberry. I'm going to be your MC for this evening. I'm joined here today with an all-star panel of govies, that's right, government employees out in the wild, actually talking about games. We're so excited to be here. I'm joined today by a full cast. A little bit about myself first. I'm Liz Newberry. I'm the director of the Serious Games Initiative at the Wilson Center, which is a federal think tank. And I have a doctorate of games, as it were. I have a PhD in communication studies, but I focus on games. I'm joined with today with Sarah.
Yes, hi, I'm Sarah Hughes. I'm a communications designer and a qualitative researcher with the lab at OPM. We're a group of designers who work within government and across government.
And what for those tuning in from home, what is OPM?
Office of Personnel Management.
Awesome, thank you so much. And then we're also joined today by two colleagues from the Smithsonian, different parts of the Smithsonian, but first, Ruben.
Hi, my name is Ruben Brenner-Adams, and I'm an interactive developer at the Smithsonian Science Education Center.
And then Cody.
Hi, everybody. My name's Cody Coltharp, and I'm a digital interactive designer at the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access.
Awesome. Thank you again so much for everyone who's tuning in today. We're going to be available also through the chat, so feel free to click like and subscribe. Wrong medium. Feel free to put in questions in the chat as we go through. We're going to kind of keep this at a quick pace, but just as an overview, not everyone in government knows each other, surprisingly. It's a big beast. So we're all coming out of a group called the Federal Games Guild, which is an informal community, which means that we're not formally organized through any government structures, but we're a bunch of people who believe in games and the power of games to activate the public and also just in general meet our various mission goals, which means that we try to use games, we love games, and we're here to talk more about games. The mission of this particular panel is going to be to provide tools and insights that can be used for distance learning, specifically games, because we love them. But there's also a couple of insights that we want to provide as far as like how to make distance learning fun and exciting using these sort of technologies, and just in general, equipping people with the tools to do more distance learning. The question might be why? Well, unfortunately, or not, distance learning is today our new normal. It's not new. It's not as in like we have been distance learning for quite a while now, but in general, it's become a much more pressing issue of today. So we thought we might step into this conversation and provide a couple of different games that we've been developing over the course of several years that can be either a starting point for conversation about distance learning, or can really sort of hopefully be a useful tool for those sorts of cases. I'm going to hit it off here. Again, I'm from the Wilson Center, which is a federal think tank. We're generally focused on international policy, is a tribute to President Woodrow Wilson and his 14 points. However, I lead the Serious Games Initiative, which has done a lot of work also in domestic policy issues. What does that exactly mean? Well, it means that we try to answer this question of like, how do we make really complex, wonky-donkey public policy accessible and engaging to those not just involved in policy discussions, but those who are the broader public. And one of the ways that we do that is through games. Serious Games Initiative, by the way, doesn't mean that I'm just like sitting here sad at my desk, although there's other reasons for that might be. But in any case, the Serious Games just means that they're games that are intended for an educational or positive purpose, which in this case is about educating around public policy. One of the topics that we've tackled the most, which only in DC would we think is a fun and exciting topic, is the federal budget. So the federal budget is, you may have tried to follow in the news, is a little bit of a complex process. The different policies tend to shift very frequently. And one of the things that's a little bit nebulous is what is their actual impact on our national debt? How is it going to help the nation long-term negotiate national debt? And we took this question, we were like, how do we make this, the federal budget and federal budget policies accessible to a broader public? And one of the ways that we did that is by around 10 years ago or so, we created a game called Budget Hero. And Budget Hero, you were the hero, you were a superhero helping to combat national debt by passing policies. And it was massively successful, and not to be humble about it, but around 2 million people played the Budget Hero series. And one of the things that was really interesting about this game is that while you're allowed to select and freeform and sort of choose your own adventure with what policies you'd enact, it also engaged a really broad audience for that, especially for that time. It was very monumental, engaging not just kids, but also adult game players. So especially the more 65 and older, which I think are called silver gamers in some texts, we managed to engage those, and it was a very popular game for the time. We needed to update it, so the latest version of it, we partnered with the Brookings Institute to create the Fiscal Ship. Now, the Fiscal Ship is not just Budget Hero 2.0, because there were a lot of lessons that we learned from the Budget Hero process that we wanted to implement and really put into this particular game. One of those was, how do we make it more accessible and vital as a remote learning tool? Now, when I say remote learning tool, this game is not an extensive game. It's not long to play. It's more of a casual game, if you will. You can play it in about 15 minutes. But really, one of the things we wanted to think about is, how do we make it fun and exciting, not just for people who are playing it in classrooms, but also who are playing it, the 35 and older crowd is one of our major players, and how do we make it accessible and fun for them? Small note here, if you really want a very deep dive into Fiscal Ship, there are lots of YouTube videos out there where people have taken this particular game and gone policy through policy. Bless the YouTube streamers on that front. I will not make you do that today. Instead, I'll just give some highlights. So one of the things that we do in the Fiscal Ship is we take Congressional Budget Office data projections. So these are projections that estimate what the national debt is going to be long term, and we convert them into the game and layer that with different policies. So as you pass policies, you can see what the impact is on national debt. You can also see pros and cons to those policies, which I'll get a little bit more into. But one thing, if you're thinking of exciting and remote opportunities, is to think about what data is out there and available. In this case, Congressional Budget Office data. You just go to a website and you can click on it and download it. And we extend those projections to a 25-year projection, but there's free and open data that you could take and use into a game. As far as playing it, the other thing is we kept it really simple. Again, this is like a 15-minute playing experience. You basically choose your mission, you choose what goals you want to meet, and then you pass policies to meet those goals and also decrease debt. So the idea is that you not just meeting your own goals, whether you want to protect the elderly in this case, or strengthen national defense, or shrink the government. You can pick those goals and you pass policies to meet those goals, but you also have to meet the meta goal of decreasing national debt. Here's just some quick screenshots. Basically, the flow of the game. You pick whatever policies you want. We have a new election edition out, so if you want to play through Joe Biden's priorities or Donald Trump's priorities, they describe what those priorities are to clue you into what policies might be correlated with those platforms. And you can always look for more information on that. Part of the reason we wanted to make this open choice, though, is because we're a nonpartisan institution. We're part of the government. So we're not steering you in a particular direction. We really wanted you to have the option to pick your own goals as part of this process. It's not prescriptive. Then you go to the next screen, you get a bucket full of policies and you click through. They have quick, non-economist explanations, although all of our content has gone through a nonpartisan board for approval, and arguments for and against each policy, and then you pass a plan. Simple enough to do. Most of these, it will also let you know if the goals you pick are a little too tricksy, like if they're going to be too hard or conflicting to pass. One of the things we heard from teachers is that they wanted also tools, and this is from the Budget Hero, one of the things we learned is that they need teaching tools in order to really implement this in the classroom. So again, we partnered with the Brookings Institution. They created this wonderful PDF that goes through different teaching tools. We also have colleagues who have made a plan or a lesson plan that is not quite plug and play, but pretty close to plug and play. And it really walks you through how you can integrate this into a classroom experience. This is growing to be more the standard in gaming spaces when they're used in educational settings, is to provide these sort of curriculums and tying it very closely to the curriculum. I think Ruben's going to talk a little bit more about that later on, but really how do you make it just it's not just here kids play a game, but really making it about a full-on learning experience. The other fun thing that we learned from teachers infrastructurally that they wanted in the game was they wanted to be able to share the plans that their students were producing. And specifically, they wanted them to be able to print them off. So we developed a way for them to printing. Of course, now you can tweet at your teacher if you would like. This is a digital moment, as it were. And you can also compare plans. So at the end of the day, the teachers can hold up different plans and use this as sort of an articulation point of how different students or different groups of students approach the federal budget differently. One of the biggest lessons, though, that we learned from these experiences is that you can be a hero and really empowering people to be agents of their own learning process and making it fun to do so can make something as wonky donkey as the federal budget accessible and fun. And that's really one of the things that if you want to take it to distance learning, that's one of the major goals, is to make it fun. I would leave you with a question, and I'm going to cue up my colleague here, Sarah. One of the questions that you have to think about, though, is how you can make it fun for adult learners. So Sarah, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Let me share my screen and talk a little bit about an interactive story game that we created to help veterans better understand benefits, government benefits. I'm not going to get to the game right away. Instead, I'm going to share a little bit of how we got to a game as that platform for best sharing this information with veterans. So I work with a design group inside government called the Lab at OPM. We use the human-centered design process to find out ways to make government service more responsive to what people really need. And so we use the human-centered design process to, as a way to answer a question that had been posed to us about how we might make VA benefits in particular help VA more clearly explain VA benefits to veterans based on their particular life circumstances and what they most needed, what they most wanted at that at a critical moment in their lives. And so that was the kind of the challenge that we took on. And our first bit of work was to really go both to VA and understand their needs and how they wanted to communicate VA benefits to veterans. And so we heard from staff within VA that they wanted us to build on what already exists, take full advantage of education resources that were already there. Don't start from brand new or reinvent the wheel. We also heard from them that it was important to communicate to veterans benefits offered by VA as a whole, not by any sub-office of VA or sub-office, so as to make the communication more clear. We then went and spoke with veterans and we asked, what would be helpful for you to better understand the kind of broad universe of VA benefits that you might be eligible for and that might help you at different moments of your life? And we documented what they told us. They said very clearly and strongly that they wanted to find out about benefits in a way that worked for them and that was convenient for them, that they could access at any time or moment throughout the day. We also heard from them that, from the veterans, the many veterans we interviewed, that it was important for them for VA benefits information to come to them in a way that was customized to their moment in life. So don't show me if I am just starting out, kind of starting out in my 20s or 30s. Don't show me too much information about retirement benefits. What's on my mind is more so housing subsidies or the GI Bill. So customize your conversation with me based on where I am in my life. So what we did then is we came up with some different prototypes that we thought might answer the needs of the agency and, very importantly, the needs of veterans. And we used what we heard from both, crosswalked our prototypes against people's needs, or considering people's needs top of mind. And it was an interactive story game that we found best met those needs. In particular, an interactive story game would allow veterans to move through decisions and scenarios around spending education benefits, because in this particular game, we focus just on education benefits within VA. But it would allow veterans to move through different scenarios. How about I decide to spend my education benefits for my educational advancement? What if I were to spend my GI Bill benefits? What if I were to transfer them to my children? What decisions would that entail? What if I want to spend my education benefits on an online school? What if I want to spend my education benefits at the brick and mortar college in my own town? So it was a game, an online story game presenting several different scenarios about how to spend benefits that really allowed us that flexibility to customize the story of benefits based on people's interest at the time. The other thing that, again, we heard very strongly from veterans was, speak to me in a personalized, warm manner. And so that's also why a story game was the way to go, because we could set the tone and invite people into a story setting using like a narrative conversational tone. So the other thing that we took very seriously as we were building out this story narrative is we wanted it to be real, and we wanted it to reflect the actual life experiences that we heard when we interviewed veterans. So as to build our story world and our storylines, we took everything directly from our interviews with veterans. So we sat down and had a number of veterans and heard that there were some people who, when they were thinking about government benefits, they were really thinking about, how do I protect my home front? And how do I find those benefits that will help me do that? We heard from other groups of veterans that they were really they were just kind of starting out in life and looking to expand their horizons, and they wanted benefits that would help them do that. So we built that into our storyline. We heard very specific scenarios from people's stories about, oh my gosh, I didn't read the fine print in the GI Bill, and so I spent the GI Bill this way, and without reading the fine print, I didn't realize the repercussions. We built that into the storyline. And we also built in critical details that we heard from people's stories. So for instance, a number of the people we spoke with said that they really weighed and considered the advice and counsel of their trusted buddy when making decisions around veterans benefits. So it was important to make the story real and relevant and hew as closely to what people were actually experiencing in their lives. we did, after we created our online story game, we went back to veterans and tested the story game and made sure to gather their responses and feedback to make it, basically to make it work better for them. And we heard a number of different recommendations. And so for instance, people wanted to find out and play out the scenario spending benefits, but then get a lot of detail at the end of the game about specific VA resources that could help them once they make those decisions for real in real life when the stakes are higher. So we made sure to keep those recommendations and that feedback in mind for the second version of the prototype. And we heard, most importantly, we heard that it was helpful. We heard that an online story game did help those who tested the game think more about the benefits that might be helpful for them and kind of jog their thoughts about how to go about exploring them. And we also saw the game as a product, but also a way of gathering really critical information about what's top of mind for a lot of transitioning service members. So it's also a great deal of helpful information that we shared more broadly with offices within VA. And so that's the story, the backstory of an online interactive game for veterans about benefits. And I want to pass things over to my colleague, Ruben, who would like to share some information about how to make online resources relevant and resonant for all different groups across the country.
Thanks, Sarah. Like I said earlier, my name is Ruben Brenner Adams, and I'm an interactive developer at the Smithsonian Science Education Center, which is a small unit within the Smithsonian Institution. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about distance learning resources from the Smithsonian Science Education Center. And then my colleague, Cody, is going to talk about distance learning resources from the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access, as well as a couple of other units around the Smithsonian. So first, I want to talk a little bit about the Smithsonian Institution. When most people, if most people who have heard of the Smithsonian Institution think about museums, and they think about the Smithsonian Castle, which you can see in the picture here. And the museums, you know, they're all around the National Mall in Washington, D.C. They're iconic buildings. They're really amazing cultural, scientific, historical sites. And there are other museums that the Smithsonian operates in other places around the country. But I want to point out that the Smithsonian not only is the world's largest museum complex, but it's also the world's largest museum education and research complex. And not only does it include museums, it also includes 9 research centers, 5 education centers, 3 cultural centers, 21 libraries, and a zoo, the National Zoo here in Washington, D.C. And I am coming to you from one of the education centers, the Smithsonian Science Education Center, and Cody is going to be talking to you about the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access, which is another one of the education centers.
So Ruben, real quick, is it fair to say that you get to work with pandas?
Not directly, but one of the games that I'm going to talk about does involve pandas, and we did get a lot of our research data from the National Zoo.
Awesome.
So one of the things that is clear about the Smithsonian is that it believes in lifelong experiential learning. Each normal year, the Smithsonian reaches 11 million people through our educational programming in person and 33 million people through museum visits. Obviously, that is in a normal year. So things are a little bit different right now. And that's why we're talking about distance learning. going a little deeper into the Smithsonian Science Education Center, it is the only Smithsonian organization dedicated to formal STEM education. So that means that we're really invested in classroom learning in science, technology, engineering, and math. And we are specifically creating curriculum and resources that are great for teachers and students in the classroom. But in the case of our digital resources, we're also creating products that are useful for students outside of school, in supervised or unsupervised situations, and in informal spaces like after-school programs and other sort of less classroom-focused areas. The mission of the Smithsonian Science Education Center is to transform K-12 education through science in collaboration with communities across the globe. And we were working to promote and accomplish this mission for years. But in 2020, K-12 education was transformed just, by itself. And so we have really had to adapt what we are producing and how we're engaging with our students and teachers to reflect the realities of a society where students aren't necessarily going to school 5 days a week and may not be going to school physically at all. So here is the broad link for the Smithsonian Science Education Center's distance learning resources. I wanted to give it its own slide so that if you want to take a picture of it, you can easily find it and access it. On this site, we have a number of resources, and I'm going to talk about some of the highlights. So one of the best distance learning resources that we have is our collection of digital media. This includes games, apps, simulations, animations, videos. I think that's all. Ebooks as well. It's just a really, really amazing library of digital, interactive, and passive learning resources. A lot of them are good for ages 5 through 14 or so. Some are good for high schoolers, and then there are some great resources for adults and teachers and educators as well. From this group, I wanted to highlight two resources in particular. So this is a game called Tammy's Tower, Let's Think About Engineering, and it is an engineering design game for ages approximately 4 through 8, although Liz will attest, it's great for adults too, and Cody as well. The idea of Tammy's Tower is that students will be building a tower out of simple shapes and learning about the physical properties of those simple shapes in engineering, geometric shapes. And once they've built the tower to a specific height, an animal, a heavy animal, in this case, an Asian elephant, or it could be a giant panda, will come running across the screen and shake the ground. And so the tower must be stable enough to stand up through the shaking so that Tammy, the main character in the bottom left there, who's a golden lion tamarin, can climb up the tower and reach the fruit on the branch overhead. So this is a really great resource for students, both in formal learning spaces as well as informal learning spaces. I've had kids love to play this. They would, when we were showing this at a conference, kids would take the iPad and not give it back for like an hour because they just needed to beat all the levels. It's super engaging and fun. It's available for free on our website at the link in the bottom left, as well as on Apple devices, Google devices, and Amazon devices for free download.
And some of these games are in multiple languages, right?
Yep, Tammy's Tower is available in English and Spanish. And I also wanted to note that if you go to that link at the bottom left on our website, You can also find a free lesson plan that accompanies the activity. It's not associated with any particular curriculum. It's just sort of a standalone lesson. So if you're looking for an educational activity to do with a young person in your life, whether you're an educator, a formal educator or not, you can easily jump in and understand what is going on in the game in terms of learning and in terms of mechanics. The other resource that I wanted to highlight is called Pick Your Plate, a global guide to nutrition. And this is for a slightly older audience. It's generally best for middle schoolers, but really anyone from ages 8 and up can play it. It does get a little bit difficult, and so I've had adults that really enjoy it as well. Pick Your Plate is a game about building healthy meals in countries around the world using local ingredients, local recipes, local dishes, and local nutritional standards. So for example, you may travel to Finland and find that the Finnish nutritional standards require that you eat fish as part of your daily diet. And so not only is this a great way for students to learn about nutrition, but it's also a great way for them to learn about sort of geography and why Finland might value fish very highly in its diet, historically or in modern day. So I think it's just really interesting to be able to compare the nutritional information or the nutritional guides of these different countries, both visually and in the way of thinking about why they choose the nutrition categories that they do. Pick Your Plate is also aligned to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, goals 2, 3, and 4, which you can see on the right there. And it is also available for free in all of the places that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I want to just jump in here really quickly. Please feel free to tweet at Ruben if there's a particular level or two that are too difficult. I have been doing that. I'm not salty at all about it. And I'm sorry for jumping in right here. My dog was barking while Sarah was presenting, so I didn't want to interject there. But Pick Your Plate is a very, very fun game, even for adults.
Yeah, I really like it. I mean, I'm biased because I designed and developed it, but it's a really wonderful way to think about, even for adults, to think about what you're eating and what value it's bringing to your life.
Or to travel virtually,
Yeah.
right?
Or to, yeah, in a
I
time
travel
like
by
this.
my stomach, so I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, so right now we have 8 countries in Pick Your Plate. That includes the United States, Mexico, Argentina, Lebanon, Benin, Finland, Cambodia, and Australia. So you can really go around the world and find local dishes and eat what looks good to you, and it's a really great time. I want to also mention that Pick Your Plate is part of a series of curriculum modules that we have available for free on our website as well. These are just like huge PDFs that you can download. You can download a particular part of them if you don't want to go through the entire module. But if you are an educator and you are looking for some United Nations Sustainable Development Goals aligned curriculum, this is a really great way. Or even if you're just looking for some free science curriculum, it's a pretty amazing resource. As you might imagine, Pick Your Plate is part of that middle module that you see there, which is called Food: How do we ensure good nutrition for all? But the other 2 modules that we've developed so far are called Mosquito: How can we ensure health for all from mosquito-borne diseases? And COVID-19: How can I protect myself and others, which is especially relevant right now. It's a really great way for either an instructor-led or student-driven education to happen around COVID-19, what the risks are, how you should be preparing yourself. And it's actually fairly readable for ages 9 or 10 and up. And it's available in 24 different languages so far. So that's a pretty great resource. We partnered with the World Health Organization to develop that one. So yeah, like I said, all of these are available at the link in the bottom left. And with that, I want to pass it on to my colleague, Cody, from the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access.
Thanks,
you all.
Ruben. And he got the name of our organization right every single time. I'm so impressed. Such a mouthful. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. And before I jump into some of the games that I want to share with you, I'm also going to show a few of the educational resources that we have to offer that are specific to digital learning, or distance learning rather. Similar to the link that Ruben shared, the link is here at the top. So learninglab.si.edu/distance learning. At that site, you'll be able to find all the different resources that the Smithsonian has to offer on distance learning, divided by the different audiences, from caregivers to young children, all the way up to teens to even adults. So I wanted to highlight three of those. The first are what's called choice boards. And so you can see here on the left side, a choice board has 40 activities on each one, and there are 10. And it's organized by science, social studies, culture, and arts. The next one is a summer road trip activity guide for those that have kids that are elementary age. It's chock full of educational activities that are super high touch that they can do on a road trip, or if they're bored at home. And then finally, the distance learning education guide. This is divided up by age, and it is just a comprehensive list of everything that the Smithsonian has to offer as far as distance learning. So there's a lot of activities out there. The Smithsonian is huge, and sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed by having too much. But if you are just feeling totally bored or wanting something to do, then I recommend going to this site. So on to the games. I'm going to share 3 games from our office, and then I'm going to share a couple from other offices. But in general, the theory is that the Smithsonian has a lot of stuff. We have millions and millions of artifacts, artworks, images and paintings and texts and audio. And the Smithsonian is not just about collecting this stuff, but it's also about collecting those stories. And so our theory about games is to take those stories and present those objects in a way that is super engaging and super fun, and has an impact on the audience more than just looking at a regular object and listening to it or reading some kind of placard. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of that, and then I'm going to go into 2 additional examples from other museums. And I'm going to be as quick as I can, because otherwise Liz will remote call my cat to jump into my lap to cut me off. So this first one, the Wright's flight, it is a simulation of the Wright brothers' original flight. And in this kit, there's a classroom activity that connects to standards, and 2 interactive online experiences, one where you go through the iterative design processes of designing a flyer, and the other that you just test, as you can see in the GIF in the top right, test what it would be like to fly that flyer. The next one is called Journey Through an Exploded Star. The link again is in the top right. And this is a 3D representation of data that's collected across the electromagnetic spectrum of a supernova, or a star, exploding. And it was led by a scientist named Kimberly Arcand. She's in the bottom right. And it's an amazing, amazing project. In this kit, it has a classroom activity where it goes through the basic properties of the electromagnetic spectrum. And in the top right is the interactive, where you can go through and explore that data in 3D. And the bottom left, it's a 360 mobile VR experience where Kim narrates what you're seeing. And the bottom right is a video of Kim explaining what it's like to be a scientist, specifically one that studies stars.
So Cody, here you really developed a sort of a holistic educational experience, like in a lot of different ways, using a lot of different mediums. Was that just, we really love supernovas, or was there a deliberate choice in making like a website and an
Sure.
interactive and a VR experience?
Yeah, no, absolutely, on purpose. I think there should be a huge spectrum of technology because not every classroom has access to like VR equipment, right? Like maybe 1 out of 100. And most classrooms, in my experience at least, it has been really, really slow internet on computers that were around before the dinosaurs. So how can you make experiences that every kid at every classroom is able to do either in school or at home? And so when I'm designing, I try to hit that whole entire spectrum of either zero technology and just having something that you can print and play at home. And you'll see a couple examples of that, to web only, no downloads necessary, to mobile devices. So I really want to hit a spectrum of experiences and focus on what those specific experiences offer the best. So yeah, absolutely. It's a big part of it. And if I go over, Liz, it's because you interrupted. Okay, so the next one is the Secrets of the Sea project. This was just recently released in April. And again, it's the same kind of formula where we have a classroom activity and that is aligned to next generation science standards. There's an online interactive, and again, it's just WebGL. You just load it up in your browser. You don't have to download anything. All the narration is closed captioned, again, by the lead scientist. This time it's Dr. Nancy Knowlton, from the National Museum of Natural History, and she's in the bottom right. Again, the idea of a high touch, how can I experience this even just on paper? And so we created a print and play card game to go along with it. And then that video of what it's like to be a marine biologist. And we're really lucky to have Dr. Knowlton because she's had just decades of experience to work with the oceans, and she just has this incredible knowledge and this incredible voice around the oceans. So that's Secrets of the Sea. And now I'm going to jump into two other projects that some of my colleagues have made. This is the Apollo Moonshot, and this is for Apple and Android devices. And it's primarily an AR app that it provides a bunch of different experiences where you can have the lunar module rotating around your room. But it also has a lot of really amazing archival footage and rarely seen footage, and as well as some audio recordings that were previously unreleased, all from the vaults of the National Air and Space Museum. So it's a really, really neat experience. It tied in with a video series that they had worked on. And the last one, Ripped Apart, from the National Museum of American History. And in this game, it's for Apple and Android devices. You assume the role of a museum curator and you try to solve a mystery using real documents dating back from the Civil War. And it's kind of a ghost story. It's really fun. And I highly recommend this one as well. So that's all I've got. If you want to access the resources that all of us have shared, there is a short link in the bottom right of this screen. So it's s.si.edu/PAX 2020. And with that, I think we'll do a farewell and then jump into questions. Liz, I guess I'll pass it back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Cody. I was very scared to ask any further questions, but now we'll give everyone else an opportunity to ask questions. So feel free to jump in, and we are very grateful that you came to our panel and looking forward to any sort of questions, quandaries, or ways that we can direct you beyond the scope of our presentations. Thanks.